Hey guys, so for today's video in the History, Major Flaws, and Why It Got Cancelled series, I've decided to take a look at the Jeep Comanche. I have a whole series of these types of videos, and I've already done many Dodge, Chrysler, Ram, and Jeep vehicles, so make sure to check out my playlist in the top right corner if you're interested in another vehicle. For these videos, the first part focuses on looking back at the history of the car and all the details and specs, and then we jump to talking about the events that led to the car being cancelled and any flaws that it had. The Comanche is definitely not as iconic or well known as some of the other Jeep models, but it's slowly becoming a classic, and prices are rising as the truck becomes more rare by every passing year. The truck had a short life with just 6 model years, introduced in 1986 by American Motors Corporation, or AMC, and gone after 1992. So let's begin. In the mid-1970s, people were becoming interested in daily driving pickup trucks. Japanese manufacturers found their way into the American markets by introducing compact trucks with small engines, with examples such as the Mazda B1600, Toyota Hilux, and Datsun 521. To compete, American manufacturers began to make their own compact pickups. By the mid-1980s, AMC and Chrysler were ready to enter the compact truck race, with the Jeep Comanche releasing for the 1986 model year and the Dodge Dakota for 1987. AMC chairman Paul Tippett spoke about releasing a new truck, saying, quote, "People are finding trucks a reasonable and sophisticated alternative to cars," end quote. This was also a time when AMC was in some financial turmoil. They were preparing to release a new line of midsize sedans, which would end up being the Eagle Premier, so they decided to leverage their popular Jeep brand to try to bring in more revenue. They based this truck on the XJ generation Cherokee, called it the Jeep Comanche, and released it in 1985 for the 1986 model year. Production of this pickup moved under Chrysler Corporation in 1987, as they would acquire AMC and take over the Jeep brand. As for the name, the Comanche tribe is a Native American nation that became the dominant tribe on the southern Great Plains in the 18th and 19th centuries, and thus they're often referred to as the Lords of the Plains, ruling land that would later become Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Kansas. The United States government officially recognizes them as the Comanche Nation, with headquarters in Lawton, Oklahoma. If we look back at the trim levels and MSRP, we find that the Comanche was the lowest priced Jeep model across the entire 1986 Jeep lineup. The rear-wheel drive standard began at $7,590 US, with the X at $8,275 and the XLS at $8,601. The four-wheel drive versions added about $2,000, so that brought the XLS four-wheel drive total up to $10,500. Over the course of the Comanche's lifespan, various trim levels were added, like the Chief and Pioneer, which added more features, the Sporty Eliminator, and the top-of-the-line Laredo. Adding in a long wheelbase version and four-wheel drive for pretty much every model meant as many as 13 trim levels in 1988. Taking a look at 1990, the standard cab short wheelbase rear-wheel drive began down at $8,500, the Pioneer four-wheel drive long wheelbase rose to $12,000, and the Eliminator four-wheel drive long wheelbase went all the way to about $15,000. If we adjust for inflation to 2021, that puts the truck around $18,000 to $25,000 in price, so that's a pretty fair price for what you're getting here. Now let's look at the exterior of this Comanche truck. Again, the styling, engineering, and the drivetrain were based on the newly introduced XJ Cherokee. The structure is very unusual for a truck, as the front half of the vehicle, or the cab, kept the unibody construction of the Cherokee, while there was a traditional body-on-frame design that the bed sat on. So Jeep designed a subframe, or uniframe as they called it, that connected to the modified Cherokee unibody structure in order to support the cargo box. The frame design under the cargo bed was fully boxed, with a large X structure that was centered over the rear axle. The frame rails were also deeper than any regular midsize truck frames for extra strength, 8 inches as opposed to 6 or 7. 2 subframes were designed, the first for the 7-foot long bed model, which came out first in 1986, and then the second, a shorter version for a 6-foot short bed, which debuted in 1987. The Comanche was also the first truck with a unibody and removable bed. The Comanche was bigger overall on the exterior than any other compact pickup, domestic or Japanese, and the cargo bed was wider than any other, only equaled by the Chevy S10. For the first 2 years in 1986 and 1987, the Comanche used a wide 10-slot grille, but it would use an 8-slot grille from 1988 and onwards. On March 9 of 1987, Chrysler would buy out AMC, as they, quote, wanted to capture the highly profitable Jeep vehicles and 1,400 additional dealers, end quote. Chrysler chose not to mess with the Comanche too much, just adding minor changes for better compatibility with some other Chrysler vehicles. Now we can spend some time on performance, as there's a ton to go over with 4 different engines and 6 different transmissions. I'll try to keep everything detailed in a chart for each year, engine, transmission, and the power outputs as well. Starting with the engine offerings, the initial 1986 model came with three choices. An AMC 150 2.5-liter inline four-cylinder was standard, or there was an optional Renault 2.1-liter inline-4 turbo diesel, and a General Motors LR2 2.8-liter V6. The 2.5-liter had 117 horsepower and 135 pound-feet of torque. The turbo diesel was 85 horsepower and 132 pound-feet of torque, and the V6 was most powerful with 115 horsepower and 150 pound-feet of torque. The 2.5-liter base engine was paired to an Aisin 4-speed manual, with either an Aisin 5-speed manual or a 3-speed Torque Flight Chrysler automatic as options. The turbo diesel came solely with the Aisin 5-speed, and the V6 could be had with the automatic or the 5-speed. And if you're wondering, AMC had began purchasing Aisin transmissions, and Chrysler mostly continued that practice with the Comanche. The V6 was also used in the Chevy S10 and was barely more powerful than the base 2.5-liter from AMC, and was also equipped with a 2-barrel carburetor instead of the 4-cylinder's electronic fuel injection. That meant little performance gains and less gas mileage, so that engine was removed after the first year. The replacement was a 4-liter AMC 242 inline-6 with fuel injection, and that had a much improved 173 horsepower and 220 pound-feet of torque, good for 50% more power and 47% more torque than the previous V6. 1987 also saw the turbo diesel removed, and the 2.5-liter would get a small power increase. A new 4-speed Aisin Warner automatic would get paired with the 4-liter inline-6. This transmission had electronic controls where the driver could choose between the power or comfort modes, making it fairly high-tech. The 4-liter engine got incremental power improvements over the years, and was originally using Renix or Renault and Bendix engine control electronics. After Chrysler's takeover of AMC, those systems were eventually replaced with Chrysler's own parts, and the engine would be badged as a Chrysler high-output engine with 190 horsepower and 225 pound-feet of torque. As mentioned, there were 6 different transmissions offered in the 6-year life of the Comanche, all of which you can find on screen, manufactured by Aisin, Chrysler, and Peugeot. On screen you can find the fuel economy summary chart as well, with each engine putting up some pretty respectable numbers that are around the same if not better than most pickup trucks today. Now let's talk about suspension and the drivetrain, which is always an important discussion point for any Jeep vehicle. Base Comanches came in rear-wheel drive, and this was actually the first Jeep pickup available without 4x4. Jeep did this intentionally as the market showed that 75% of compact pickup trucks sold were in two-wheel drive. Of course, four-wheel drive could still be had with a part-time command track system or a full-time select track version. The Cherokee's front suspension was used here with coil springs, upper and lower control arms, and a track bar to keep the axle centered under the truck. This was known as the Quadra Link suspension, with the coil springs intending on providing a comfortable ride while also adding capability off-road by improving the axle articulation, which is the vertical wheel travel or how far the axle can move up and down relative to the chassis. The Cherokee and Comanche were the first Jeeps to use it, and modified versions were later used on the Grand Cherokee and Wrangler TJ. The rear had larger leaf springs than the Cherokee for improved load carrying. There was a big ton or metric ton package that was added for models with a long bed, with heavier duty leaf springs and wheels, larger tires, and an upgraded Dana 44 rear axle as opposed to a Dana 35. Stock payload capacity was a respectable 1,475 pounds, but with the big ton, that rose up to 2,205 pounds. Not bad for a compact truck that weighed between 2,900 and 3,100 pounds. Towing was rated for up to 2,000 pounds with the 4-liter inline-6 in the manual transmission, but AMC claimed that the Comanche could offer best-in-class towing of 5,000 pounds with the automatic transmission and trailer features, which was ahead of the Chevy S10 and Ford Ranger, but those numbers are kind of up for debate. So overall, the Comanche was never the blockbuster success that the Cherokee was. It was considered a reliable truck, with gas mileage ahead of its time in the 21 to 24 mpg range, aftermarket parts cheap to replace, and many trucks would hit over 250,000 miles with no major issues. It was also one of the most capable compact trucks around, but it just never seemed to gain the following or the attention of its competitors. Chrysler decided to axe the production of the Comanche on June 12, 1992, after just 952 were made for that year. So that brings us to the next part of the video, looking at the reasoning for the cancellation and the flaws of the Jeep Comanche. I've come up with 5 different reasons and or flaws that refer to the car or Chrysler decisions. So let's have a look. So first I'll start with low sales, a typical symptom of any car or truck that is on the verge of being cancelled. The late 1980s were some of the best years of the compact pickup craze, with the competition moving tons of trucks, with the Dodge Ram selling 60 to 70,000 per year, and the Ford Ranger and Toyota Hilux well into the hundreds of thousands, That's just in the US, and that's just to name a few brands. Unfortunately, the Comanche arrived a bit too late to truly capitalize on this, and thus sales of the Comanche were never very high to begin with, peaking at 43,718 units moved in 1988. From there was just a sharp and steady decline, dropping by 42% in 1989, and then another 62% in 1990. 1991 saw just over 5,000 sales, and by the time the plug was pulled in 1992, just under 1,000 Comanches were sold. Overall, 190,446 Comanches were produced over the 6 model years. So with such few sales, the Comanche wasn't doing much for Jeep profit-wise, and it had to go. Another huge reason is the fact that during this time, Chrysler was attempting to make the Jeep brand fit into the Chrysler pyramid alongside Plymouth, Dodge, and Chrysler, and Dodge was already the truck brand, with a full lineup of trucks including the smaller comparable Dakota, which launched in 1986. That meant Jeep would be reserved more for SUVs. This created a huge conflict of interest for Chrysler, to the point that in 1990, the National Council of Jeep Eagle Dealers asked Chrysler to discontinue the Comanche as it was getting in the way of them selling the more popular Dodge Dakota midsize. Why was this newly acquired Jeep company going to steal sales away from Dodge? And Chrysler eventually agreed and fully invested their efforts on Jeep being the SUV brand. As we mentioned a few times, the Comanche was based on the XJ Cherokee and shared an assembly line with the Cherokee and Wagoneer. The Cherokee was selling 5 times more than the Comanche, moving 100 to 150,000 SUVs every year. Building more Comanches and pushing those to the market meant sacrificing highly profitable and popular Cherokee production. The Cherokees were flying out of the dealerships, while the Comanches needed big incentives and heavy discounts to sell. So that made the decision pretty easy: simply phase out the Comanche. Unfortunately, while variants like this are cool, as I call the Comanche a variant of the Cherokee XJ, sometimes using the same platform for multiple vehicles just doesn't work out. Take a look at Dodge and Chrysler and the LX platform. The Charger and Chrysler 300 were variants of the same vehicle, and they were both very popular. The Dodge Magna was another variant, but that sold half as well as the Charger and had a short life from just 2005 to 2008. So sometimes even a reputable and unique variant like the Comanche just doesn't have the same success as the original vehicle that they were based on. While we mentioned that the Comanche was a solid and reliable truck, maybe it just wasn't competitive enough. It was smaller in size than any of the domestic pickups, it didn't offer a V8 engine, and 3 adults inside was an uncomfortable experience. There was no extended cab offering, which all the other compact trucks had by the time the Comanche was released, and the pricing was always higher than the Ford Ranger and Chevy S10, leading compact truck buyers to look elsewhere. Just before we end the video, I wanted to look at one flaw of the Comanche. This was pretty much one of the only things wrong with the truck, as it was very solid otherwise, as we talked about. But unfortunately, Comanches were very vulnerable to rust wearing down the body if the truck wasn't maintained well, and that rust would be so crippling and severe that many Comanches ended up getting demolished. And most of those 190,000+ that were manufactured probably aren't even alive today. That was also a common issue on many American vehicles during this time though, not only this truck. That does mean that the mint Comanches are now becoming more coveted and valuable, selling for $10,000+ US for ones in good shape. So that's the end of this video, guys. Of course, it would be another 27 years before Jeep brought back a pickup in the form of the 2019 Wrangler-based Jeep Gladiator. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed it. It was definitely fun to check out the Comanche and what it had to offer. What do you guys think about this truck? Did you ever own one? Let me know down in the comment section below. Make sure to like and subscribe for all your Mopar content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.